Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Brian Jennings. This is my channel, which is dedicated to processing the nature of my relationship with Quentin Tarantino, to discussing the true story of the movie critic. Right? I'm an actor. Often I'll begin these videos with Shakespeare. I want to play Hamlet. That's all. But I wrote Quentin a series of letters about playing the lead in the movie critic. It's a movie about a writer. I'm also a writer, right? Like here's a page, right? Here's another page, right? I have 1,000 notebooks all over this house, right? And so, right, at the risk of going on and on, right? What I'll say is, as we're getting started, if you're new to the channel, welcome, right? Please feel free to engage, right? I want to hear what people have to say about it, right? I want to hear what the public at large has to say about it, right? So leave a comment, like, comment, subscribe, share, right? And hit the notification button, right? All the things. So, right? At the beginning of 2024, after I had written, not a lot of letters, but in 2 bursts, I wrote some letters to Quentin, right? I wrote 4, right? And then I wrote another 6 after the press announced that he had halted production and he violated my mind. Quentin is a psychic clairvoyant who remote views people, right? Who is a psychic voyeur and violates anyone's mind he sees fit, right? So, after right? I'm a powerful psychic clairvoyant as well, right? The most powerful of the millennial generation. And we'll get more into that in due time, right? I'm tired of talking about it, but I have to talk about it every day. In every video that I make, I have to make sure I go through these rudiments, go through what occurred, right? So that everyone understands like what's actually been occurring versus like what he says has been occurring, right? And everything that I'm saying, right? I'll just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off for you. He can always deny, right? He's interested in cunning, he's interested in guile, right? He's interested in psychic mind violation, right? So of course he's gonna lie forever, right? And so he's pushed it to such an attenuated degree that I have to, like, these are the 2 positions, I have to talk about it forever, right? I'm insane and he's evil. That's like, this is the condition, right? And that's fine, right? So, right? At the end of January, right, he announced in the press that Brad Pitt was reuniting with him and stopped accepting my mail. So it took me a while. I was really depressed. I thought, this guy thinks I'm an asshole, right? Right? And I know that, like, here in a minute, I'm going to talk more about what occurred later, but I know that that was a big factor in why I did what I did those months later. So after processing it for maybe 7 days, I said, okay, I get it. I didn't write him anymore, right? No more letters. Right? I wrote a 7,000-word essay about it. Torching Brad Pitt, torching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? Right? Cliff Booth and Brad Pitt are the same person, right? The whole impetus to write that script was Brad Pitt beating up his wife on an airplane and getting away with it. Cliff Booth murders his wife on a boat and gets away with it. Brad Pitt beats up his wife on an airplane and gets away with it. Was he like actually like Bruce Lee? You know, like, no, of course not. Like, that's like, you know, like I'm wise enough to know that. Right? That he smacked her around, screamed right in her face, poured beer all over her. It was psychological torture, but physical torture as well. Right? The flight crew felt compelled to call the FBI. Right? I'm not talking out of my ass right now. So, right, I published the essay. When that failed to take flight, I said, oh, well, what else can I do? And so I said, oh, I should review movies every day and protest. And if you go to my Substack, right, that's always in the description of these videos, right, you can read an example, right? I'm not laying claim to being some sort of fantastic critic, right? There's any number of things that I didn't put in those reviews, right? But they were word heavy, right? So I reviewed 3 films in protest. #boycott the movie critic, right? The first one was An American in Paris with Gene Kelly. Second one was Mr. Skeffington with Claude Rains. And the third one was Gone with the Wind, right? With what's his name? Rhett Butler and Vivian Lee, right? And Olivia de Havilland. So with the last one, I tweeted it directly to him, right? Said, there it is. Feel free to read the other two, as you and or your film are mentioned in both of them. And he canceled the film the following day, right? I am the reason he canceled the movie Critic. There's no other reason, right? I'm the reason. So I wrote him immediately, right? He said nothing, right? He started violating my mind immediately again. Every night. I was working in New Orleans at the time. I would always sit on my back porch, right? I hit a joint 2 times, right. He said, oh, I can't fuck with this guy. He's writing right now, right? Because he remote views people. He's a psychic voyeur, right? So Quentin announced that he was doing a screening of Jackie Brown at De Niro Con. Right? And I see now that he set the whole thing up. Right? He's interested in cunning, right? Like he's interested in guile, right? That he told, right? He canceled this film when he was beholden to people, to Stacey Sher, to Sony Pictures, right? And he said, there's this actor, right? He sent me this scene. I want to use him. Right? And so, right, he told all of them that he talked to me when he didn't actually talk to me. And yes, it was petty on some level, like for sure. Right? But he set up this screening, right, to compel me to go there, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, all the way. I never wanted to go. Seemed stalkerish, didn't want to go. Right? And now I know I shouldn't have. Now it's like I didn't go. Right? But, right, he wanted me to question him about his book. Right? He convinced me to buy his book, Cinema Speculation. Right? So, I wrote him again a week before Tribeca. Refused at the door. Both letters. As soon as he canceled the film, refused. A week before Tribeca, refused. Right? The day before, I don't know why I did this, but I felt compelled to write a letter. I wrote another letter. Here's the letter. Right? So, right? The two come out. Their conversation is all about me. Right? And this is where I felt guilty for a long time. Right? That he's making jokes about Voltaire and classic theater and how there's nothing wrong with being a regional actor. He was accepting me. Right? And so, in that way, right, I blew it. Because all I had to do was relax. Right? But after he finished, I asked him to sign my copy of Cinema Speculation. There it is, right there. Right? Quentin's ugly signature, right? And so I pushed this letter all the way up to his face. Right? And I'm sure he thought it was funny at that time. Right? But he stuck his nose up at me and turned his back on me. And so I did the same thing and I left. Stupid. It was so dumb. Right? And I was arrogant for maybe like a week, right? Because I haven't mentioned this yet, but I sent him a scene in the first time he violated my mind. Right? I was acting in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. And while all of this was going on, right, I really just like suspected that these actors had read my notebook. Right? And so I know this is what happened now. Like he compelled me to go off. I went in there and went the fuck off. Right? And they threw me out of the play. And so after I got thrown out, I thought, how do I turn it into a virtue? And so I recorded it at BK Actor Self-Tape. Shout out Elliot. And I sent it to him. Right? So, right? I was arrogant on some level because I knew that he wanted to use that scene, that he is using that scene. But after about a week, I felt really bad. You know, and I said, oh, I'll build you a planter. I'm gonna build you something. You had the scene for free. Like, I'll make it right. Right? And so, right, when on his end of the equation, right, though I'm speculating on some level, right? I suspect the people around him said, no, it's his career, right? He didn't sign up to play a fucked up mind game, right? And he said, this fucking guy has turned everyone in my life against me. So, right? He entered into a campaign to compel me to madness, to make me appear at least insane. So he could say, see, this guy's crazy. Like, look at, right? Which is apex evil. That's like as evil as it gets. Right? And WME, they basically insulated it, right? William Morris Endeavor. Right? And so from there, right? Right? The campaign began, right? Or I could make a prologue to my brains, they had begun the play, right? Being thus benetted round with villainies. He eventually, the first weekend of August, right, when I was watching Fish, revealed a woman to me, right? And they played their psychic mind games in my head all weekend, stole all my secrets. And finally I said, what do you want? You want me to come there and scream at the top of my lungs? He says, yeah. And that's, boom. He got me again. Right, because then, right, when I went off, right, to giving him what he wanted, like what he, it's the same tactics, right? It's the same tactics, right? He's interested in, that's what he does, right? That I went there and went off and he said, see, look how crazy he is, right? And then he led me to believe that a woman was in love with me, right? There was his daughter. It's all bullshit, I know. His daughter's a little girl, right? We'll talk about that in due time. Right? But, right, I believed him. I believed him for months because I felt bad, right? And so, when I wrote, eventually I was in New York and then I ended up in LA, and when I hand-delivered my curse, right, I put the fear of God in everybody in that room, right? Arrogant Hollywood jackasses, right? And then when I went back again and hand-delivered my love poems, right? Then he said, oh, see, look how crazy he is. And him and his fucking wife were going, ha, 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 ha. I suspect that she played the woman a lot. Unless it's all him. Could all be him. Then he's just weird and sad, right? He's a weird, sad, angry man. That's what he is. Right? And so, right, then he did it. Then I seemed insane. Right? And so the plot unfolded over these months, and then in due time, his daughter became a bitch and a whore, right? Who likes to fuck. That's what you have to say about your daughter, right? And so I wrote another essay, 9,000 words, right? Where I put all my secrets, everything they stole from me, right? Cunning is bullshit, right? Psychic mind games are bullshit, right? And so I published it online for 12 hours. And then I said, well, what about Fish? Right? Fish was my favorite band. I don't know if they still are. And he said, okay, sure. Right? If you can get him to agree to let you play on stage with him, then all's well. And so I wrote Fish a 2-page letter. Didn't go on and on about it. Pled my case. Said, if you write William Morris Endeavor, right? Now, I don't know. I don't know if they wrote. I don't know if they wrote, but I'm not going to go on and on about Fish, but I suspect that they did write, that they reached out in some way, or Quentin got ahead of it, right, and threw me under the bus immediately, right? Because again, right, when he stole my secrets, I put them on paper because I respect it, right? And he went, oh, ha, 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 look at this jackass, trusting me, right, thinking that I love him. Right? A sad, angry, evil man. Right? And so, right, they led me to believe that Fish was interested in playing, and then they led me to believe that Eliza Anastasia was in love with me, right? And so this is all the subject of my novel. I've written a novel. It's called Building a Coven. Right? Right? A coven as in a coven of witches. Right? And so inevitably I ended up back here, right, in Alabama. Right, there is no movie, that's what he said, right, and for about 6 weeks, right, I was still just like getting tortured, like as much as he wanted, all the way up until New Year's Eve, 12/31, 2024, wherein I printed out Allison's picture for the first time, right, A Tarantino. It's the first bitch who pops up when you type in. Like, his conspiracies are shallow, right? He could have found somebody that starts with like a T or like an R, and it wouldn't have been so blatantly obvious. And I don't know, maybe he does know her. Right? Maybe he does know her. I don't think he does. I think the woman that I saw in LA both times, she had a fucking wig on or something. Right? But at any rate, that whole night, it just plagued me with visions of evil, right? Visions of her being a whore. Right? It's all bullshit, right? And then in like a day or two, right, she became a prostitute who works cheap, $500 an hour, right? That she gets bukkake poured all over her, that she fucks 5 guys at the same time, that she fucks 20 men in a day. That's my daughter. And then within another day or two, right? Because I was buried in a minute, right? As far as, right? It's one thing to be something, right? Like that's like, I don't care what anyone does, right? But he wanted me to believe that he had raised a wicked practitioner. That's my point, right? That not only did he raise a daughter to be an awful witch, right? That he raised her to feel justified in torturing me while she's doing it. And of course, it's all him, like, okay, like I get it, like funny, right? Because within another day or two, he admitted he has no daughter, right? And so from then on, I've been trying to come clean, right? And so, right, I've decided I'm going to find these letters I wrote to aemanuel and Mike Simpson. I don't know where they are, but I'll find them. Then I'm going to read them here, right? And so that's more or less what's been occurring, though it's gotten exponentially worse. If you look at my video, A Plea to the Pope, you'll see what it is, right, in terms of, right, Quentin really, really doing it, right? Now he's really playing the cunning game, right? Right? The ugliest, most degenerate evil anyone can practice, right? And so, what am I talking about? Right? I mean that the things that people refer to as remote viewing, psychic, telepathy, clairvoyant, telekinesis, psychokinesis, thaumaturgy, that these are the same things that people referred to as magic and sorcery in centuries past. They're not similar things, they're the same thing. Right? The words are different, the tactics are the same. Right? So, inevitably, we always have to discuss this, that the mystery traditions are divided into 2 categories, the lesser and the greater, right? The younger and the elder, right? And so, the lesser mysteries is defined, for me, in terms of my worldview, right, by the horizon of your ignorance. It's a line that you can never circumvent it, right? You can get a little closer, right? You can learn a little more, but then the frame gets wider, right? It's like a fractal, right? So this is the infinite complexity of God's omniscience, right? This is the reveling in occult magic, right? That's right. But the greater mysteries is the answer, right? That's the question, right? The question is the recognition that you will never circumvent your ignorance, right? That it's impossible. You can't do it, right? But the answer is that doesn't matter. That's not a here nor there, right? What's important is that there's one principle which is the guiding light of creation, and that's love and giving. Right? That God, which is not a creature, it's an abstract intellectual quality, and we'll get more into that in a second. Right? Through the process of manifestation, right, gives and gives of itself unconditionally forever. And so, how does that occur? The lesser mysteries demands that we say that perhaps right? It's just as valid intellectually that space moved and consciousness came after. There's no way to know. Boom, there it is, the horizon of your ignorance, right? And so what I'm saying is that works on some level, right? That if motion, as soon as motion began, it perpetuated itself forever. Then memory is a condition which is a static embossment upon the body of space, the firmament of space, wherein the motion was accrued, right? Which could inevitably lead to consciousness, complex cellular structure, etc., etc. However, the standard model of physics doesn't really lend itself to that idea very well, right? In the standard model of physics, right, which is reductionist, materialistic science, it has no basis in spiritual understanding, though it doesn't have to be devoid of it, right? They allege that within 1/100 millionth of a second, right, the four principal powers that stabilize and allow the universe to operate emerged, right, perfectly stable. And so that's the strong and weak nuclear forces, special and general relativity, quantum mechanics, and electromagnetism. So now we've established the argument of the lesser mysteries, the question, the nihilistic narcissism, right? But if you suppose that mind moved space, then space by default must arrange itself into a particular pattern. Pribram and Baum's holographic model alleges that all of space, every single cubic centimeter of space, is embedded in terms of information with any possible expression of manifested reality that could possibly exist. Right? And so this is me, right? Like there's nothing in the literature that suggests this. That to me is an infinite complex nesting of polyhedra. Now, here's an example, even though it's fallen apart, right? This is a compound of 40 tetrahedra, 20 pointing up, 20 pointing down, with the vector equilibrium inside of it, right? And so, right, here's a tetrahedron, right? Here's the icosahedron, right? All within all, right? All within all. So densely, perfectly nested together, right? That they dissolve into seeming non-existence. And so diffused within that totality, right, of forms, right? This is Plato's allegory of the cave, right? That what we see is a shadow. What we see is a corrupted kinetic shadow of its idealized form, right? And so the allegory itself is discussing the philosophic life versus the non-philosophic life, right? But if you kind of just elevate that idea, right, and say, oh, what he's getting at is that all things reside as idea and emerge as a degradation of the idealized idea, right? And so diffused within that complex is the impetus for motion, right? Which I commonly refer to as the divine light of deity. And so eventually, though they both exist perpetually in a state of rest, God the Father seeks to express his knowing and exerts pressure through motion upon the quantum manifold, upon the quantum electric waveform of probability, right? And so even though it's falling apart, right, the manner in which the motive force, right, exerts itself upon the structural scaffold, right, of the hologram, right, reflects what we see it materialize as in the manifested world. And so I've explained this any number of times, but I'll explain it again because we have to go through these things every time, right? That I can close this complex in a sphere and then draw a circle around the surface of the sphere and call that a great circle because it bisects the volume of the sphere, right? All 360 degrees that go around this complex are potential vectors of pressure wherein the divine light of deity can push upon this, can exert a force of pressure upon this, right? And so there's an infinite complex, right, potential for great circles that surround this thing, right? And so the angle or angles, right, defines what it becomes in the material world, and this is the dignity of God's omniscience, right? And so when it exerts pressure, right, it collapses, right? The hologram collapses. And as it's collapsing, it's engendering electric resistance, grating as friction against itself, space grating against itself. And as it continues to collapse, the electric resistance inevitably becomes so great that it can no longer remain inert space and erupts into incandescence as matter. Right? First as light, and then as the pressure continues, right, it's an inverse. Right? The denser it gets, right, the heavier the element. You understand? And so, inevitably, right, you end up at mammals. Inevitably, you end up at complex cellular structure. Right? Inevitably, you end up in man. Right? And so the highest levels of man is the artist, right? Is because they're channeling, they're behaving just like the divine light of deity. Right? That they're concentrating, right? Right? And what they're concentrating on is engendering a particular pressure condition, which is collapsing, right? Electromagnetic energy into their brain, right? Which exerts a pressure, like for a writer, like with a pen, boom, onto the page, right? With a paintbrush, right? With a surgeon, right? And the highest levels of that, right? These are all sidereal. Those are kind of like ignorant. You don't really know what's occurring. You're just like doing something. You're like, oh, I want to do something, right? But at the highest levels of that, right, is the psychic medium, right? At the highest levels of that is the clairvoyant. At the highest levels of that, right, is the voodoo witch doctor practitioner, right? Who use their mind, right, to exert a psychic pressure upon the firmament, right, which fractures the hologram to their intention, to their will. Right? This is what Crowley's talking about. Will is the law, right? And so this is what I'm embroiled in right now, right? Or life is accidental, right? And nothing matters, right? That's like that's the other side of it, right? But if that's true, if that's actually true, right? I posit that there is no validity in psychic phenomenon, and we know that there is, right? If consciousness is an accident, then it can't be a conscious effort, right, that a clairvoyant exerts, right? And since we know that free will is also valid, right? And perhaps it's some synthesis of the two. But I don't believe that. Right? So, Quentin Tarantino is a powerful psychic clairvoyant. One of the most powerful in the world. Right? And he's been doing dangerous, ugly, evil things to me that he thinks it's funny. He thinks, or he's getting, I don't know, is he exhausted? I don't know. I don't know. But at any rate, right, he's being dangerously evil to me, right? And I can do the same things, right? But he's a fucking coward, and he'll send people to murder me. So, if you recall, now that we understand, right, I've been going through this book, Spherical Models, right? My reasoning being thus: if life is structured according to a divine holographic projection, right, then therefore, by studying abstract geometry, right, you embed within yourself pieces of that divine quantum hologram, which thereby allows you to be a more powerful clairvoyant, right? So, these are the masters. I was doing the cube octahedron, right? Here's one. There's the other one, 2 squares. And here's the form. I would say it's perfect. It's as perfect as it can be. And so I tried to make this once before, but now it's really lovely. It's a continuous curve. Goes all the way around it. This is the cube octahedron, the vector equilibrium, right? And so the most famous iteration of this, right, was designed by Buckminster Fuller. This is Buckminster Fuller's masterwork, right? Is understanding this, right? Where he turned the edges into rubber, where he had like a ball bearing or something, and that's called the jitterbug. He realized that it collapses out of the condition that you see here into an octahedron, and then a tetrahedron, and then a triangle. So, right, this is arguably the best one I've made yet, right? And so, right, for me, the takeaway is that it came from the Star of David. That's amazing, right? That's is that in any of the books? Is that in the Torah? Right? I'm sure there's any number of rabbis, like Kabbalistic rabbis, who have put a compass in their hand, right? But the real point that I'm driving at here is that the decision to make this the symbol for the nation of Israel, right? I posit had nothing to do with aesthetics whatsoever, right? That these people, right? That's in certain circles, right? More occult, sort of magic circles. This is referred to as the Seal of Solomon, who of course was King David's son, right? So it's the Star of David, right? He could have named it. He could have named it after his father. Why not? Why not? What do we know about Solomon? Right? We know that he was very wise. Right? He split the baby. Right? We also know that he was a high magus. Right? That he had multiple gods. Right? Right? So my point is that he had a lot of knowledge. Right? That's my point. Right? And so if he had a compass, and I'm alleging that he did, right? That no high magus can operate without one. Right? Then he arrived at this form because it will lead you to this. Right? This is like this, that's, you get it? Right? My point is that God operates on a principle, right, of love, of giving. He gives and gives and gives, and matter materializes thereby, right? That something emerges out of seeming nothing, right? And so the writer, right, the writing is our own expression of that eternity. Painting as well, right? But, right, this is the same process, isn't it? It's the same process. Something palpable, tangible in the three-dimensional world, emerging out of seeming nothingness, the blank page. Right? And that's, right? Right? And I talked about this again, but I'll walk us through it one more time, just to be thorough, right? That I needed to use the Star of David, right? And I think there's at least one other way that I could have done it, but it probably requires this as well, right? Because of the relationships between the hexagon in the middle, right, and the radius of the initial circle on the edge, right, divides the circle through a process that I'm not going to go all the way through now, into 360 degrees, right? That each of these triangles, right, that they're an arc, right? And so therefore they come from a circle, right? They all come from a circle, right? So that's amazing, right? Does Quentin know how to do that? Just a crazy guy. I suppose I'll stop. I'm tired of fighting, right? I'm tired of, like, the truth is that we'll never be free of each other, right? that he'll always say I'm insane. Like, yeah, I'm all caught up. What I will say though, right, is that we're approaching his Lifetime Achievement Award, which is on Sunday, and I'm in so much fear, right, that he's going to be awful, that he's going to do awful, evil, angry, disgusting, evil things to me because he's an angry man, right? I could have just done nothing, I suppose. Could have just never revealed myself. But it was time. It was time. It was God telling me. And so now God's telling me to make this channel, right? And so you can believe the celebrity, right? That's fine. He's a charming guy. But what I'm saying is that he's lying to everyone, right? Everyone that I've written, it's obvious. He just tells them I'm a crazed fan, right? And I'm in a state, right? He's in a state too. That's the point, right? Like, that's the point. We're both, this is why I'm talking about it, right? Because no matter what he tells people, right? He's up to here with it as well, right? That he is in a dangerous pathological, psychological condition, right? There's no formula where this persists for 20 years, right? He's gonna break and send someone to fucking assassinate me, right? Perhaps even this week, right? Because he knows he can't torture me anymore without being evil, without just being evil. Like, there's no varnish anymore, right? There's no subtlety, right? And so how do I know that? Like, why do I arrive at this condition of fear, right? I arrive at it because when he spoke at Cannes earlier this year in the summer, I didn't know that. I didn't know what he was doing. It's none of my business what he does, right? Like, he made that clear, right? I had no videos up online. I was moving on with my life, right? That while he was speaking, right, he had other people torturing me and making my life miserable because we're so connected, right? We're so, boom, right there, right? That he felt it prudent to have other people, right? People who call him master, right? People who make sure their bills are paid by serving him, right? Be evil and disgusting, right? To me, that whole night, right? Because it was at like noon or whatever time, but that's 7 hours in the future from here, right? So I was like in bed, and I didn't know what was occurring. It was peculiar to me. It's like, why? Like, why are we still, like, it's been so long, you know? And so I looked it up. And then I got it. You know, then oh, okay. Right? Like, while I was asleep, right? They torture my dreams a lot. Right? And again, right, it's remote viewing. Like, you believe it, you don't believe it, you know, like, I can lead you to the water, you know, but I can't make you drink it, you know. But they plague my mind a lot with visions of violence, right? Visions of evil. Right? And I could do the same thing. Right? I can do the same thing. And I'm getting to that point where I have to find people. I have to find people, and we all have to, right? Like, is it just going to degenerate into a disgusting psychic siege? I hope not. I hope that's not what I want. That's not like, just go away, right? No money required, but I'm going to talk about it until we acknowledge each other, because it's just too evil. So, see what's good in your life. Know that life is not an accident, right? Like, comment, subscribe, share. Uplift your soul to God. Don't forget to hit the notification button, right? Let me know what you think. God bless.